Hi, I'm Kelly with citruscycles.ca. I'm here with the Bulls 650 Plus E FS2. It's a full suspension Bosch powered e-bike. For the detailed specs, current pricing, or to order online, head over to our website at citruscycles.ca. There you can also find our contact information, and you can reach out by email, toll-free number, Facebook. We're more than happy to answer any questions you have about this bike. You can also schedule an appointment to come out to Ladysmith and try it out here on Vancouver Island, or take advantage of our Try at Home program, where we'll bring it to you anywhere on Vancouver Island or the Lower Mainland. And of course, we ship right across Canada free. So it's Bulls uses very long descriptive names for their bikes. This Bulls, of course, is the brand. It's a German company, and they've got a long history in Europe, very popular there. They're relatively new to North America, but they're definitely growing and adding to their bike models that are available here in Canada every year, so it's great to see. 650 Plus refers to the tire size. These are 27.5-inch tires, and they're 2.8 inches wide. So that's 650 Plus E, tells you it's an e-bike. It's Bosch power, the Bosch CX, right down here. And the FS tells you it's full suspension. We've got 120 millimeters of travel. We've got a RockShox Recon. It's an air fork up front with a remote lockout. And we have a RockShox Monarch RT on the rear here. It's also an air shock as well. The two, so we've got, hey, look at that, it's even labeled on the bike here, 650 Plus EFS2. I don't have to try to remember it anymore. The two tells you that this is their mid-tier bike. This bike is $800 less than the 650 Plus EFS3. I've done an in-depth review and ride test of the 650 Plus EFS3 on our website at citruscycles.ca, so you can head over there to see a ride test and details on this bike. If you're just wondering, what's the difference between these two bikes, I'll get into it right now to save you watching the whole video. There's really two main differences. And that is the suspension. So we've got 150 millimeters of travel on the FS3. It's a RockShox, what is that, an RT Deluxe. And on the front we've got a Yari, and that gives you 150 millimeters of travel. That's going to give you a much plusher ride. It's going to be able to absorb more bumps. With the more travel, it just gives you a little bit more of a luxurious ride, and definitely handles obstacles a little bit better compared to the 120 millimeters that's on the FS2. There's nothing wrong with 120 millimeters of travel. Up until, in the last few years, that was pretty standard. We're just starting to see more and more travel becoming available. And so that's one of the differences between the FS2 and the FS3, and that accounts for some of the price difference. And the other difference is on the back here. We've got a Shimano 11-speed on the back with a really big climbing gear, you can see, whereas on the FS2 they've done a 10-speed cassette, and so you don't have quite as big of a climbing gear. So where you're really going to notice that $800 coming in is in the ride, in terms of the suspension, in terms of the comfort, and the ability to really go on very technical sections of trails. And if you've got really, really steep hills, then you might miss having that extra speed, that extra 11th gear on the FS2. But if you're looking for a good way to save $800 and still want a very capable bike that's a lot of fun to ride, has really good components, then the FS2 is a good choice to consider. So in this review, I will be focusing on the FS2. Like I said, I've done an in-depth review and ride test of the FS3 on our website at citruscycles.ca. So I won't be doing a ride test of the FS2, but because they're essentially the same bike, just different suspension and, like I said, the cassette, you can head over to our website to check out the video of the FS3, and I'll definitely go into more details on that video. This review here of the FS2 is not going to be quite as in-depth, but I'll still step through everything for you, and like I said, you can check out that other video or get in touch with us. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. So this is, like I said, a plus-sized bike. It's got the 27.5 plus tires. These are 2.8-inch width, Schwalbe knobby necks. Gives you a lot of traction, and I'm loving the plus-size tires, especially on an e-bike. You really, with the wider tires on an e-bike, you're not as concerned about the increase in rolling resistance. So yes, they're slightly slower. You're going to have to work a little bit harder, but you know what? You've got that Bosch CX drive here to help you out. So that really isn't as important. What you're gaining is a lot more traction, control, and stability. So I really notice when I'm riding on loose gravel, well, it's a fall, wet leaves, mud, anywhere where on a narrower tire I would be slowing down, I'd be choosing my line more carefully, I'd be, you know, a little bit hesitant. With these plus size tires, I just feel so much more confident riding the bike, and it allows me to ride a little bit more aggressively, and you know, really I'm safer with these wider stable tires. So I'm really loving having the wide tires on fairly wide rims, which allows you to take advantage of the wide tires. This is a through axle at the front here, and it's the Boost standard, which gives you a wider hub. That wider hub and wider rims again allows for more strength in the bike. The through axle allows for more strength. So really you can ride very aggressively with this bike, and you're not going to worry about things breaking or just the bike not being able to handle it. And that's the nice thing about with the Bosch CX here, is you can see Bulls has oriented the motor at an angle to really help increase the clearance here. They've included an aluminum bash guard, so when you're riding on trails and you're riding over logs or things like that, you're not as worried about damaging the drivetrain because you do have this protective guard here, and you also do have an aluminum bash guard protecting the chain here as well, which is nice to see. So even though, you know, this is the FS2 with more mid-tier components, they're still putting all of the same quality and attention to detail that you would expect on the FS3, and that's really nice to see. We have, as I mentioned, the RockShox Recon, which gives you 120 millimeters of travel. It is an air fork, so you can come over here with a shock pump and adjust the air based on your weight. And we do have rebound control at the back here. We also have a remote lockout, which is interesting. That is not available on the FS3, but with the FS3 here you do have a compression dial, which gives you a little bit more control over the performance of your front shock. These are just like the FS3, they're the Magura brakes. At the front here we've got a 4-piston brake, which is great, gives you loads of stopping power. We've got a nice big rotor up front as well. They are of course hydraulic disc brakes on the back. So on the front it's the MT5. On the back here we've got the MT4, which is a single piston. And of course most of your stopping power is in the front brake, and so that's why they go ahead and they put the 4-piston brakes up there to really help make sure that you have a lot of confidence in stopping. With the hydraulic brakes being hydraulic fluid rather than a cable, there's no cable to stretch, rust, or break, or to get out of adjustment. And as well, with the hydraulic fluid, you really can stop this bike with one finger on the brake lever because it's relying on the hydraulic fluid to do the adjustment, to stop the brake or stop the bike, rather than your mechanical force like you would with the mechanical disc brake. We do have some adjustability here as well with the levers to bring them closer, further away from the bars, which is nice to see as well. I mentioned we've got the 10-speed Shimano Dior. We have a visual indicator of the gear that you're in, which is handy, and we do have the trigger shifters here, and this is a bi-directional shifter as well, which is handy. You'll notice it's a bit of upgrade on the FS3. We've got textured shifters here, and it looks like this is metal, and over here we've got plastic, and we don't have that texture. So, you know, a couple little differences like that, but we still have these great grips here that are ergonomic and very comfortable. But of course the touch points of the bike you can always change, and I always recommend to people, you know, if you don't like the grips, you don't like the saddle, or you don't like the pedals, those are really easy to change. The pedals I'm happy with. It's a Bulls branded Selle Royale. It's quite comfortable for a mountain bike saddle. There is a little bit of cushioning in there, but of course you could change that out if you wanted to. And the pedals, well, the pedals I would change, but I think most people do change the pedals that come with the bike. It's hard for a bike manufacturer to make everybody happy. So these are, they're good quality, well-go pedals. For myself, if I were going to keep this bike, I would put some platforms with removable pins. But that's just my personal preference. There's nothing wrong with those pedals per se. We do have a little bit of a plastic slap guard here, chainstay protector. You might want to put something neoprene on there to just really protect it. With the Dior XT, it doesn't look like we have the clutch that we would have over here on the FS2. We have a clutch which tightens up your chain, makes the shifting a little snappier, and kind of prevents a lot of the chain slap that would happen on this bike over here. So that's again one of the small differences between the FS2 and the FS3, but definitely if you put a chain guard, chainstay protector on there, that would help a lot. So as I mentioned, this has the Bosch CX drive system. I'll briefly touch on that, but my other videos I go into a little bit more detail on how the Bosch system works. This is the Performance Line CX, which is fantastic because that's Bosch's top-end drive system. Gives you the most amount of torque, highest level of assistance, very responsive, so as soon as you put some pressure on the pedals, the motor activates and gives you the power that you need. I'm also excited about having the CX because that does give you the new e-mountain bike mode. So when we come up here to the Intuvia display, and the display is removable by the way, and functions while it's off the bike, so I can use my trip computer information while it's off the bike. That's kind of handy. And I'm used to the Intuvia display. I like the size. It's easy for me to read all of the numbers, and I can see a lot of information at once. I point out what I like about the Intuvia display because some of the bikes we're seeing now come with the Purion display. And the Purion display is integrated with the buttons on the left side of the cockpit, and it doesn't show as much information. The other big advantage of the Intuvia display is there is a USB charging port here, so you can actually charge USB devices off of your main battery while the bike is on, and that's a real plus for me. So with the Intuvia display, you have the display in the middle and the remote on the side here. And so as I adjust my levels, you can see right now we're off. I just press the plus. That moves me up to Eco, which gives me about 50% of my input power. Tour, which is a good kind of all-round setting. It's about 120%. Now when I press plus again, do you see where the clock is displaying there? It says EMTB. And also says Sport up here. EMTB is an adaptive mode. It's a really fantastic electronic mountain bike mode or electric mountain bike mode, which automatically adjusts the assistance from Tour all the way up to Turbo. Now, when you put it on EMTB mode, it'll always say Sport here, but it will adjust the power depending on the situation. It's fairly torque sensitive, and that's the great thing about the Bosch system, is it actually is calculating your torque, that is how much pressure, how hard you're pedaling, your cadence, that is how quickly the pedals are moving, and your speed. There's a speed sensor back here, and it calculates those 1,000 times per second to basically read your mind. So when you're in EMTB mode, it's taking all those calculations into mind and figuring out, if you're pedaling really hard because you're heading up a hill, it's going to automatically give you full power. It moves you up in the turbo, gives you maximum torque, maximum assistance, so you can climb that hill. When you get to the top of the hill, or you're in a descent, or you're going on flats, and you're not pedaling as hard, then it's going to bring it down to Tour to help conserve your battery, and also to help make sure that when you're in technical sections, when you don't want a big surge of power because you're trying to manage your way through a rock garden or over some roots, then it's not going to give you the maximum power to help you stay in control. So I really like having that EMTB mode. It means I don't have to worry about doing these adjustments anymore with the plus and minus. I can just set it and forget it. Now, some people like to have that fine control, and so you still can use the plus and minus to bring it down to tour or up into turbo. But I really like having that automatic mode. Over on the remote here, you'll notice in addition to the plus and minus, we do have an I button, and that cycles through the trip computer on the bottom. You can also do it from the display here, so if you take the display with you, you can still check your stats. So we've got things like the maximum speed, we've got the average speed, you've got your trip time, that is how long the bike's been moving, the range, and this is one of my favorite features on the Bosch system, is this range is calculated dynamically based on the last 4 or 5 kilometers, and adjusts to show you basically based on how much battery you have left. I've got an indicator of 5 bars here, how much further you can go. So in Eco, it's saying I could do another 142 kilometers. On Tour, I can do 73 kilometers. On EMTB mode, I've got 54 left, and if I bring it up to turbo, that reduces my range to 45. And that will adjust throughout the ride based on the last few kilometers and how much power is left in your battery. So when you combine that with your trip distance, it really helps you know, am I going to be able to make it back, or am I going to have to stop and charge my battery? So having that range calculator really reduces range anxiety, which is a really nice thing to have. So the Bosch system is definitely one of my favorite drive systems, super reliable. We really don't have problems with the Bosch system very often at all, and it's very natural feeling. Because it's driving the chain instead of the wheel, like a rear hub motor in the rear wheel just turns the wheel, because this is turning the chain, not only does it feel more natural, but it also is leveraging your 10 speeds at the back here. So when you change to an easier gear to make it up the hill, that's also impacting on the motor and allowing the motor to work more efficiently and help you climb the hill. In the Bosch system, this is rated at 350 watts. It peaks a lot higher than that. The wattage isn't such a big deal to me. I know a lot of people ask about it. Really what you should be concerned about is the torque, because the torque is what gets you up the hills. And the Bosch CX system has a lot of torque to really help you fly up the hills. And when you combine that with the mechanical advantage of choosing an easier gear and having an impact on the motor, it really helps you fly up the hills. Google Bosch's uphill flow on YouTube to see some of the real fun things you can do with an e-bike when you're flowing up the hill. You can have just as much fun uphill as you can downhill. This has the Bosch Power Pack 500. You know, I'm impressed with that. Because Bulls, you know, really wanted to get the price down on this. They could have put a 400 watt-hour battery on there, but they chose to do the 500, which gives you 25% more range than the Power Pack 400. The cool thing about the Bosch system is that this battery is a standard Bosch battery, so you know that many years from now, you'll still be able to get this battery. In fact, when Bosch came out with the Power Pack 500, they made it backwards compatible with the 400. So it's the same size and same format. So if you had a 5-year-old Bosch bike that had the 400 watt-hour battery, you could buy a new 500 and put it on there and it'll work. So that's nice to have that backwards and forwards compatibility and availability of parts and that sort of thing. It's also a nice looking bike. I like the colors. They've really tied it together well. I like the way they've angled the drive system and integrated this so that the battery and the drive unit kind of flow together really well. We do have a charging port on the side here. You can open up this little flap and you can charge the battery on the bike. Show that to you there. Or you can remove the bike with the key and remove the battery with the key and charge it in your house. And the key is only needed to remove the battery. You don't need the key to put the battery on, and you don't need it to operate the bike. It's just simply securing the battery from theft. So I think I've covered most of the things about the bike. If I've missed anything, you can head over to our website at citruscycles.ca and reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Like I said, check out the video of the FS2 for a complete ride test. The bikes handle very, very similarly in my experience with them too, with both of them. But with the two, of course, having a little bit less travel, It's not going to be as plush of a ride. And there's some circumstances where you may find that you don't have quite as much grip or traction because of that. And certain steep hills, definitely I noticed that I did want to have the 11 speed. But if you're not climbing really big hills and you do want to save some money, then the FS2 is definitely a good option. If you don't mind spending more climbing steeper hills, want more travel, then check out that video review of the FS3. So this is the Bulls 650 Plus EFS2, and I'm Kelly with citruscycles.ca.